As it turns out, a very important legendary figure in the technological world was solely responsible, or indirectly responsible if you want to look at it that way, for having the Marvel Cinematic Universe come to fruition. And I should probably say that it's because of this one person, Disney was convinced that they should be able to buy Marvel, a huge IP that would become larger than life and that would make Disney billions of dollars. And that man is, well, the Apple founder himself, Steve Jobs. And I have more on the topic right after the intro. Hey guys, welcome to News to the Science, where we discuss comics, movies, games, and more. And today we're going to be talking about Steve Jobs, a different video, a little bit different than my usual types of videos. But this really involves the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Disney, the whole sharing arrangement, the purchasing agreement, and then we'll talk about where Spider-Man falls into that category. If it's possible that Apple might be buying Sony Pictures. So if Disney can't buy Sony, then I'm pretty sure another company can. So I have more information on that topic on this article that I have online. So bring you an article from superherohype.com from a Tudor Leonte. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. I apologize. When we speak about the Disney Marvel merger, it all comes down to the late Steve Jobs. Yes, it's true. He didn't like comic books that much, but he knew for sure what it meant to do business. In a recent opted for Vanity Fair, Disney CEO Bob Iger revealed that Jobs played a pivotal role in Marvel's acquisition by Disney. Steve became a Disney board member and our largest shareholder, and whenever I wanted to do something big, I talked it over with him, Iger wrote. In 2009, after our very successful acquisition of Pixar, we were interested in acquiring Marvel, so I met with Steve and walked him through the business. He claimed to have never read a comic book in his life, and he quotes, "I hate them more than I hate video games," he told me. So I bought an encyclopedia of Marvel Comics with me to explain the universe to him and show him what he would be buying. He spent about 10 seconds looking at it, then pushed it aside and said, "Is this one important to you? Do you really want it? Is it another Pixar?" Iger went on, adding that Jobs called CEO of Marvel Entertainment Ike Perlmutter and convinced him to go for the Disney merger. When it came to the Marvel acquisition, I told him that I wasn't sure if it was another Pixar, but they had great talent at the company, and the content was so rich that if we held the IP, it would put some real distance between us and everyone else, Iger added. I asked him if he'd be willing to reach out to Ike Perlmutter, Marvel CEO and controlling shareholder, and vouch for me. Later, after we'd closed the deal, Ike told me that he still had his doubts, and the call from Steve made a big difference. He said, "You were true to your word," Ike said. "I was grateful that Steve was willing to do it as a friend, really, more than as the most influential member on the board." So what do you think about Bob Iger's revelations on Steve Jobs convincing Ike Perlmutter to have Disney purchase Marvel? So there you have it. I mean, that's one part of the story. And it's amazing how things work, right? Steve Jobs, who generally had no interest in comics, who hated comics more than video games, and he had this reputation of being an asshole. I mean, we've seen movies and biopics about him. We've read stories about him. But it seemed like he was a kind of guy that was really straight to the point, and he meant like serious business. And you can tell the kind of person he was just by the way he presented himself. And he was a really good, person that can actually captivate you and catch your attention just by the way he did those presentations in those keynotes whenever he would talk up on stage in the keynotes from Apple when they were launching a product. He seemed like he knew what he was doing, and he's actually solely responsible for Toy Story, which is my childhood film. And because of Steve Jobs' involvement, he indirectly made Disney even more rich than it ever was with Marvel, because Marvel is a huge IP and it's really valuable to Disney. And because of that, Disney's never going to let go of that IP. So it's amazing what people can do for you. And it turns out to work in your benefit. And I find this story really interesting. And we have Steve Jobs to thank for that, because without him, this agreement would have never happened. And it was all because of a favor that a friend decided to do for another friend. And I have more information on the Spider-Man deal, by the way. Reportedly, it's only a rumor, but there's nothing that can substantiate these rumors. Reportedly, Apple might purchase Sony Pictures. And if they do, the rights to Spider-Man would automatically revert back to Marvel, and Disney and Marvel wouldn't have to spend a single dime to get them back. They would practically get Spider-Man back for free. And I have more on the information with this article bringing you from WeGotThisCovered.com. And this article says, it's been a real roller coaster ride for Spider-Man fans lately. As we learned a few weeks ago that the web slinger was out of the MCU due to a breakdown of negotiations between Disney and Sony. Ever since, new reports and rumors have made it clear that the door is perhaps not fully closed on a new deal being brokered, and the latest update on the ongoing saga concerns the possibility that Apple may buy out Sony Pictures. As we've previously explained, if Sony's bought by another company, the rights to Spidey will revert to Marvel Studios. Given that, the latest info on the Disney-Sony situation is that it's on hold. As TVO of Lords of the Long Box points out, obviously the Mouse House is in no hurry to pay through the nose for the opportunity to use Peter Parker again when, if they're patient, they may get him back for free. And Lords of the Long Box tweeted out, no update on the Sony deal. It's a stalemate. Disney is in no hurry to make a new deal now that they know Apple, Amazon, and maybe Netflix is interested in buying Sony Pictures for the streaming content. Disney can get Spider-Man back for free, so why pay? So it's a really good point. Bear in mind, though, that the Apple buyout is far from confirmed. The company is also said to be considered purchasing other lucrative assets like Lionsgate, A24, or CBS Viacom instead. That said, Amazon is said to be considering going for Sony Pictures themselves, too. The reason why both companies are suddenly interested is because they both have or are working on streaming sites, but neither has their own theatrical production or distribution model. As things currently stand, though, Sony is moving forward with Spider-Man 3 starring Tom Holland. There also seems to be pretty immediate plans to cross him over with Tom Hardy's Venom and put him in the rest of the Spidey spin-offs like Morbius. Holland himself is excited for the opportunities he'll get to undertake under Sony as well, though he's also reflected on how working for Marvel Studios always felt like home. Be sure to stay tuned for further developments for Spider-Man here on Used to Astonish, by the way, and I'm definitely going to be talking more about it. So another thing I want to add on is that this is really an interesting development. If Apple were to purchase Sony Pictures, they'd essentially would allow the rights of Spider-Man to revert back to Marvel and Disney. And that's because they have control over the company. And I'm curious, will Sony products will also be known as Apple Sony products? I'm just curious, like Apple gets involved in making the products, or will they leave the product distributions to Sony? So we're talking about the Sony Pictures division, which is entirely different from the Sony Gaming division and other divisions. And this works well for Sony in both ways, by the way, because Sony doesn't really have a dedicated streaming service. Not that I know of. And if they do, well, it's not as popular as Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon Prime. But it gives the Sony the advantage to have their content, their IPs, distributed amongst streaming services like Amazon Prime, Hulu, and Netflix. So it's a win-win situation either way. But if Apple were to buy Sony Pictures, I'd be glad because Spider-Man would be reverted automatically to Marvel and there would be no problems and we can all live happily ever after and we'd all win. We would no longer be having these debates whether Spider-Man should stay with the Marvel Cinematic Universe or go back to Sony. So anyways, that's the topic I really wanted to talk to you guys. I thought it was a very interesting development because Steve Jobs is one of those icons that I simply admire. He's one of the few reasons why my life is the way it is. Because of his work, it's inspired millions to create content like myself, and it's inspired a lot of you guys out there to create content. And it's because of him, Apple is the company the way it is, because they're just incredible. I mean, you got to hand it to Steve Jobs. This guy started his company in a garage in the mid to late 70s, and look where it is today. Now it's in a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate company, and it's just awesome. It's just changing lives. And because of that conversation that Steve Jobs had with Bob Iger, and because of that simple little favor that Bob Iger asked of Steve Jobs to do, Marvel is where it's at right now as far as the filming division goes. We have a cinematic universe dedicated to the Marvel IPs. So I thought that was a very fun story to talk about, guys, and I wanted to bring it up to you guys, and you let me know what are your thoughts. I can't believe this has been kept under wraps for the longest until now. So anyways, guys, if you like this video, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click on bell for notifications so you all don't miss anything. And as always, I will see you all in the next comic panel.